Okay, I think that means we're going. All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Ebbenflow podcast, episode 8. My name is Ben, and this is a pretty special episode because I have my first guest with me. Um, my guest today is her name is Jackie, and I know Jackie through a podcast that she actually hosts, and it's probably my favorite podcast ever. Because it's had the most profound impact on my life since I started listening to it. That podcast is called Dualistic Unity. I have mentioned Dualistic Unity a few times since I started my own podcast, and Dualistic Unity has kind of inspired me to start podcasting. And I've would never think that I could do such a thing, because podcasting requires you to talk like kind of the whole time if you're not editing it. And so I always had this fear of like, I need to talk for 20 minutes or at least. How am I going to do that? I'm not used to yapping um that much, but yeah, I am very excited to have Jackie on the podcast. Um, Jackie, would you like to give like a brief introduction of who you are and maybe, I don't know, how you know me or just how you're feeling?
Yeah, sounds good. First of all, I'm honored to be your first guest on the Ebbenflow podcast. Stoked to be here. And great to just have a one-on-one chat with you, Ben, because yeah, we've brushed elbows in the DU calls for months now. So we've known of each other and we've been in the same calls and such. But yeah, it'll be cool to get to know each other a little bit better. And yeah, I'm one of the 4 co-hosts on Dualistic Unity. I started my segment with Amanda um, as co-host in like October of 2023. So it's been 7, 8 months now, and it's been quite the journey. Um, Other than that, I'm just a normal girl. I um, I recently did my yoga teacher training, so that's something I'm really passionate about and something that has influenced my perspectives a lot. And my background is in psychology, went to school for that. And all of these things have sort of coalesced into the perspective I have now that I yap about frequently on the DU podcast. And I feel you with all those feelings with starting a podcast for the first time. There was a lot of limiting beliefs that I brushed up against, and just that fear of how the fuck am I going to keep talking for so long? And it really is surprising when you just show up without a plan. It kind of just works itself out, and it's it's surprising to me that I don't run out of things to say, but I don't. And it's been a really fun journey of just sort of trusting myself with blind faith, and also facing a lot of insecurities that I had about, sort of what I have to bring to the table. Because constantly in the process of being a part of Dualistic Unity, I've sort of doubted my credibility, or that I had anything of interest to say, or that I was making sense. And time again, I've been proven wrong just by like listening back to the podcast. And I was like, oh, actually, I was kind of onto something there, or like the reactions that I've gotten from other people. But it's fun when you're not doing it for any real purpose or to like teach anybody anything. And then it's just kind of for fun, having conversations with cool people. And so that's kind of what I focus on. Like today, I was kind of nervous to come onto this podcast because it's like, okay, well, what do I have to share? And I didn't have anything to share. But I'm like, well, it'll be a fun chat with Ben, and that's all I have to really think about. So yeah, that's a general overview of where I'm at in life. Still have nothing really figured out, but just day by day learning to express myself and trust myself a little bit more.
Hell yeah. That was awesome. I love that you mentioned that this is like our first one-on-one interaction, because it is. We've only spoken to each other in group chats. So it is really nice to like have this space to connect one-on-one. And I like what you said about having no real purpose to like saying things and having words like come out of your mouth. You don't know what you're exactly talking about. I was nervous too to host this episode, because I was like, all right, I don't know. I just started like coming up with expectations and ideas in my head of like what it should be. Like, are you gonna have any questions for her, or um how's like the conversation gonna flow? Like my brain wants to just figure that out, because that's what it's like really good at doing. It's really good at trying to guess of what's gonna happen, because it really wants that sense of certainty. And lo and behold, reality will never satisfy your brain. It's never gonna give your brain that like, yeah, this is what it is. And we just gotta continue on despite trying our best to figure out what's going to happen. It's really just like the letting go of what you think will happen that will lead to like the highest sensitivity of the moment and what reality has to offer you. Um Actually, the one question that I had in my head was, I saw a recent TikTok of yours, and this actually kind of inspired me to reach out to you. And you were talking, you were doing like a self-help rant, where you were just talking about it's really not about getting better. Like I don't want to get better at anything anymore. And like existence is so simple. And like it's just like you're here. That's it. And it inspired me. I made a Instagram video a couple days ago, kind of touching on the same subject, like because I just feel like with what I'm going through and what you're going through seems to be almost the exact same, but in the different flavors of Jackie and Ben. So I had, ever since coming to like the quote unquote recognition that there's nowhere to go, um, I've kind of been conveying that message through my social media for the past 2 years. And it's it's been fun to post every video, to face my fear of how I'm going to be perceived when I post on social media. Um, and it's just like breaking that story of what I think I am every time I share an insight. But I think there is like an underlying current of, but I'm still trying to get somewhere. I'm still trying to like spread a message. And over the last few weeks, like I feel like I've I'm just kind of sick of it. I'm like kind of sick of like, and as I said in the video, like all the abstract concepts of it, like reality is this, you are this, and like I kind of just want to let all of that go. This somehow constructed path to enlightenment that I've been building, and just like play video games. Just get like really good at video games, because that's what life I feel like that's what life is about. Like it's about just being. I mean, it's fun to get into these deep conversations, but it's also fun to do other things in life that like aren't as deep. So yeah, I mean, what was like kind of what inspired you to make that video that I was talking about, and maybe share a little bit about your journey of to enlightenment and then realizing like, well, fuck all this shit.
Yeah, word. I resonated with a lot of what you just shared there. And I would agree. I feel like we're kind of at a similar point where the concepts and the high minded conversations were helpful to a certain degree, but then you realize that they're not actually going to save you from just the highs and lows of normal everyday life and save you from the moment you're sitting in right now. Um, so I guess for me, I was always curious about like the big questions of life. Like I studied psychology because I wanted to know what the fuck consciousness was and what's happening. I learned in that class that there is no answer to that. It's called the hard problem of consciousness, that science cannot explain why we have a conscious experience because like it's not really necessary. Like in theory, we could all just be robots and go about life without having a experience of being Jackie, you know? Um, so then I was like, fuck, okay. So I started looking elsewhere. I was into like spirituality for a while, and like manifestation, and um like even yoga philosophy. That was a big thing that I was really interested in. And I think parts of them were touching on things that I still believe to be true today, about specifically with yoga philosophy, like non-judgment and accepting things the way that they are. And then I was also really into studying Taoism as well, because it was talking about, the natural flow of everything that's always happening, and we can just sort of surrender to that. And it's called like, effortless action, doing without doing. And that really resonated with me too. But I I agree. Like it gets a little bit caught up in like these high-minded conceptual conversations. And that's also what attracted me to DU, is that they were talking about these things, but on a very down to earth level, right? Of just like, we don't have to subscribe to any certain belief. We don't have to be spiritual. We don't have to be like the Eckhart Tolle type, like very serene, very calm all the time. Like you could just be a normal person and explore these things and deepen your experience and appreciation of your existence. And I kind of got caught up in DU even for a while. Like it's funny to say that as a co-host, but um like I think part of me leaned on the conversation and talking about these things a lot more than just actually letting them sink in and realizing, oh yeah, there's nowhere to go. There's nothing to become. But yeah, at the same time, I was still trying to go places and become things. And I think that's a really difficult habit to shake. And at this point in my life, I'm kind of struggling with that as well. Um, and you mentioned like making content and trying to like talk about these things genuinely because you're interested in them, but then being like, who am I trying to convince? Why am I doing this? Like, what am I trying to get out of making content? Those are things that I ask myself all the time, because my whole life, I've just been so used to doing things for an end result, for something else, like not doing things for the sake in and of themselves. And I think that has been sort of changing slowly but surely in these past couple months. And I think that's aligned with my yoga practice as well, because that the practice of just experiencing what it's like to be in my body with my breath on any given day on the mat has taught me what it's felt like to do that in other areas of my life and just not trying to get anywhere. And so I think I posted that video specifically. I was just like, oh, I haven't posted anything in a while. And I'm like, well, this is just top of mind because I felt like I was reading for like a lot of my life. The reason I would read books is to gain some sort of wisdom or knowledge or edge. Like I was always reading self-help, like spirituality books. Um, and those are all well and good. Like I still think they're interesting, but I realized they're never gonna fucking solve anything. Like it's those concepts, I guess they like circle above everyday life, but now more so I'm just focused on what is actually going on in my life and trying to just soak everything in rather than trying to understand it, um, or try and like understand how it's going from point A to point B. I'm kind of just fed up with it. I've had such high expectations of myself and have put so much pressure on myself to achieve and become something for my whole life. And so now I'm just kind of letting that go. And it is a little bit confusing because sometimes I'm like, well, why do anything? Um, but things are worth doing in and of themselves. And that's why I still do yoga and I love sharing that. And I still love having conversations like this on the podcast. Um, so it's been a cool transition, I think, but definitely um, challenging in some ways. Like sometimes I struggle with motivation to do things, and I can find myself sort of losing direction and kind of just being really lackadaisical for periods of time. But it's also been interesting as well because I start to feel really shitty when I do that. So I think that there's like sort of a natural like bumper in a way of like keeping me on balance, but it's not by like creating this strict regimen for myself to like I need to do this many social media posts. I need to do yoga every single day. Like it's just because I want to do those things and it makes me feel good to participate, but that doesn't mean I have to overexert myself. So that's kind of where I was getting at. And also just appreciating the beauty and the mundane, because I think when you get up caught up in these spiritual conversations, it's like you're so focused on all of this conceptual stuff that's not actually real and not actually happening right in front of you that you're missing the garden, right? This is heaven all around us. Um, so yeah, little things like conversations with a friend or like the sunlight on your skin or like eating a really good meal. That's the stuff right there.
Yeah, that 100% agreed. The beauty and the mundane part is like that resonates a lot with me because I used to so I guess like a little bit in my life when I was going to like music festivals and concerts, I would think of those experiences like top tier. Like this is the shit. This is what life is all about. Every like time in between each concert or festival is just life. Like I'm just living in between the concerts so I can go to the concerts and like fund myself for them. And when I have that mindset, when I had that mindset, like it made the festivals and concerts really awesome. Like, I don't know, euphoric experiences, but it also on the other side of the coin like made my day-to-day life really drab, and I was kind of like miserable when I wasn't at these things because I wanted to be at those events. And it's kind of like what you were saying earlier, like I'm missing the garden if I'm just thinking about something that's not based in reality, because the only thing that's real is the current moment, is the present moment, which is here now. And there is so much beauty in here now. Like yeah, you were saying, like, I don't know, waking up, that's a pretty cool experience. Like, you're just like asleep, and then all of a sudden you're conscious and you're like, oh shit, I'm back. I'm back for another day. But you can't really like see it that way if you're holding on to things that you think you want to do, if you're holding on to preferences that you have about reality. And actually, touching on DU a little bit, there's so many things that are life changing about dualistic unity. And one of the aspects is the retreats. Dualistic Unity hosts retreats, and I've been on 2 of them. The first one was in Port Alberni, Vancouver Island, and at these retreats, like, you can, it's like the best space to just be yourself, to not have the mask on, because this I'm talking to the listener here. Listener, if you've ever, how many times in your life do you have to like not be yourself in order to meet a certain expectation or a standard or fit into a societal structure? It's probably pretty often. I mean, at least for me, I've had the mask on, like the Ben mask, or I don't know, just not being completely myself because there's an expectation set upon me about how I should act in a certain situation, or what goals I should achieve in order to attain happiness. And if you go to a dualistic unity retreat, it's not that environment. It's an environment that, like, there's no masking. Everyone is just reality, and you're you're allowed to be yourself, like, unapologetically. And there's so many beautiful aspects to that, that the one night, at the first retreat, we were playing pool, and how the game was going was there would be like 8 or 9 shots between different teams where no ball would sink, and then, like, all of a sudden there would be like 3 shots in a row where that person would sink like 4 balls, or like 3 balls on a shot. Or like, it was insane. And it got me thinking, like, you could look at that pool game and think, oh, all of those, the 8 or 9 shots where where no balls were sunk, were like the boring parts of the game. But those shots were necessary in order to set it up for that person to sink 3 in a row. So it's like the mundane and the beauty is completely based on your preference. What's actually happening is that no moments are disconnected from each other, and it's just an all encompassing beautiful experience of consciousness that we're all experiencing. And part of being reality is having the ability to have a preference. Um, and so you could, like, there's always an option. Like, you can choose to hold on to that preference, and that would your life would reflect your mindset of clinging to preferences, or recognize that it's an option, and you can let go of your opinions and let reality happen as it's happening. And there's like so much magic to be offered when you're not like trying to get somewhere and you're just here. And I think, that kind of fits in perfectly with like what we're talking about. Like it's just being. Um, Jackie and I are just being, but it's not really Jackie and me. It's just existence is happening and it's processing. And you, the listener, are just hearing yourself through me and Jackie. And whatever you're listening to is changing you. And also by you listening to us, you're changing us. And it's a beautiful exchange of ebb and flow. Got him. So yeah, I think it's awesome that you always have the ability to let go. Um, and there's so much more to life too. Like it's limiting to have a preference. And I think if you want like a full enriching experience, then be experienced. Don't be uh bought into the illusion of being an experiencer. Be the experience.
Beautifully said. Um, yeah, preferences are a bitch because like that preferences is tied into, same thing as like judgment, because a preference is just judging one experience over another. And sort of the example you said with music festivals and like idealizing that time and preferring to be there, that is creating the contrast that makes your everyday life seem drab in comparison. Well, where if you don't put certain experiences on pedestals because you assume that you know how it's going to go and how it's going to make you feel, then everything can kind of be given a similar weight and you won't experience those harsh up and downs. That's not to say there's not things to be learned from going through those up and downs, because obviously you have to go through that to have the insight that, oh, maybe I'm setting myself up for failure here just to like have one experience that's really glorious, but then the rest of it I'm judging as not as good. I definitely went through that. Speaking of the retreats, with looking forward to the retreats and putting those up on a pedestal and then like being depressed afterwards, because I'm like, damn, I won't be able to go for months now. And yeah, I mean, quick plug for the DU retreats. There, we got another one coming up in November in Port Alberni. I'll be there. So if you want to check that out, check out our Patreon page. They're awesome spaces, like Ben said, to just be yourself. And my first time going to one actually was super transformative for me. I went in August of 2023, and it's hard to describe how that environment is. But I guess the closest I'll get is like there's no like expectations that you normally have in your life, from your job of how you need to act a certain way while you're there, or like relationships and friendships where they have these preconceived notions about you and you feel like you have to cater to it. Like when you're at the retreat, it's a group of mostly strangers. At least it was for my first time. Like I had only met these people online, didn't really know anything about anyone. And there's nobody who's going to tell you how you should be behaving. I mean, obviously if you're like being destructive or harmful to other people, like we're going to check you. But like other than that, there's nothing to reinforce the insecurities that you might be holding on to, and you start to notice it more so, and you notice how you're the one that's holding on to all of these structures and expectations. And what I took from that leaving the retreat is, oh, I don't have to hold myself to these expectations even in my own life. Like it's an option, and you can sort of put down that extra weight. But it does take letting go of the false sense of safety and security that those expectations and catering them can bring you. Because yeah, it does feel safe not to upset other people or to contradict what they want you to do. Um, and I think evolutionarily, we just have evolved to not want to um, isolate or isolate ourselves from the group because that meant for survival purposes, right? But that's kind of, we're not living in the same conditions anymore, so we kind of have to override that programming in order to just be free and live a life that is a lot more fulfilling, um, and where we can get the most out of our experience. Um, so yeah, I've letting go of that preference. It's kind of a bitch, but the more that you do that, you're able to appreciate the depth in every single moment. Like, it's not just the big moments where you're going to a concert or a retreat or you're at a party or you're like just riding super high. It's also the moments where you're cleaning up your room, doing the dishes, like all of those things. They're mundane, yeah, but just because you're judging them to be that way, otherwise they're just the moment. And the moment is always going to be full, no matter what it looks like, right? And so that has led to a lot more just appreciation and depth for the little things. And kind of going back to the video I recorded, because I recently have only been reading novels because they help remind me of, like the little details in the story that I read them and I'm like, wow, like that is deep and profound within the context of this story. And it's just like a small little detail that the character in the novel probably isn't giving it that much weight, like from their own perspective. But when you kind of zoom out, um, you see how it all is like working together and everything is super symbolic. And so I've been thinking about my life sort of in that way as well. And trying to zoom out a little bit and see how beautiful and symbolic everything is and how kind of everything is working out in this seamless way without me exactly trying to curate it or orchestrate it in a certain way. And that is just, I love just like basking in the fact that like I'm just part of this whole thing happening and I just get to witness it from a first person perspective. And that's a lot cooler than seeing myself as this separate entity in this cruel world who has to prove myself for love and affection and acceptance, when in reality the way that you feel those things is by letting go. And it's paradoxical, like it's like the Chinese finger trap thing where like you want to pull, right? Because you think, oh, I get my finger out by pulling it, but really you have to push and lean into what's already happening, and just have this acceptance. And um, so that's kind of the cheat code. That's the key to life. It's just fucking accept and lean in to the ebbs and flows. Ah,
Got him again. Nice. Yeah, I mean, that was perfect. Like all the analogies you were given. Um and yeah, that was another part of the video that like resonated with me because you were like, all right, I like reading, like reading Alan Watts is like awesome, and like Eckhart Tolle and like just the David Hawkins, all these books that will like talk about what it is, what being is on a kind of like a higher level. Like you're not really using solid life experiences. You're just talking about like being reality. But in a novel, it's different because there's a story. And it's like got characters, and you're not, novels don't talk about existence and the untethered soul. Like novels are stories, like they're movies in your head. And books are fucking trippy. Like especially like when you get in like a flow state of reading, that's one of the coolest feelings ever because you're just so immersed in it. And it's trippy because I was reading a book, Stolen Focus by Johann Hari, and it's basically that book was talking about how like our attention as a collective, like our attention span is diminishing because of phones and social media. So he had talked about flow state and kind of how it's harder to access flow state these days because there's so many distractions, so many things that are trying to take you away from recognizing that everything is always in flow. And when he was talking about flow state of reading a book, it's so cool because you're putting your attention outwards to the book, like your eyes are looking at the words. So your attention's going out, but at the same time, your attention is like inwards, like in deep into your mind as you're like when you're reading a book, you're basically staring at a dead tree and hallucinating. Um and like it's trippy. Um and you were talking about like, okay, so when you're reading a book, you're kind of imagining yourself as the character. Um and all of the details that they mention may not be of profound beauty to them, but to you as like a seated back awareness is like seeing them, and it's like recognizing just how beautiful the experience that character is having. And you could just apply the same to your own life and see the beauty in like literally everything, like just how we're talking right now. Like we could get into how do microphones work, how does the internet work, how do speakers work, how do computers work. And it's just all like a beautiful intelligence that's happening, and you're observing, but you're seeing it. If you're bought into this idea of yourself, you're seeing it as, yeah, I'm just talking into a microphone. But it's like, okay, but what is that made out of? Like what's actually going on? Like what are electrons? And um it's that beauty that you can like kind of only appreciate when you're not wrapped up in your idea. It's a really freeing uh realization. And I hope whoever is listening that like you can, maybe something that we're saying like resonates with you. And it's changes like a little bit of your perspective. Not that we're trying to change perspectives on anyone. Like we're just doing anything. We're just being, and you know, causing ripples that we don't know where the ripples are going to go and how it's going to affect anything else. But is another that's another like beautiful aspect of existence, is that whatever you do affects everything else. And something could like 5 years down the road come back to you And honestly, like one thing that the Dualistic Unity podcast host Ray has touched on before is that he has always enjoyed the violin, and he had like stories of like if when he was in his mother's womb and they were playing like violin music, like he would go to the surface of the wound, like trying to like gravitating towards it. And now here he is, like 40 something years later, and his daughter's playing the violin in like a world class musical group. And he said, like, do I enjoy my daughter playing violin so much because I've always enjoyed it? Or have I always enjoyed listening to violin because I knew this was coming? And it's like, that blew my mind because it kind of like goes against linear time. It's like, are we actually experiencing a progression of moments, or is eternity all just one thing?
Oh, that is a juicy, juicy question. And I love thinking about that too. And it really gives me appreciation for just the natural feeling of like being drawn towards and away from things. Because in retrospect, hindsight is 2020, right? So you can see like, oh, yeah, I could see how all of this progressed into where I am now, and it's like it was supposed to happen that way. But as you're making the decisions, you don't see how it's going to play out down the line, and you really just don't know. And so that's really the sense that I've been trying to follow, is just that gut instinct rather than, oh yeah, let me plan out what the right things for me to do are and the right things that I should be interested in and investing my time in, because you never know how things are going to evolve. And even in my own life, I look back to like, I don't know, me being a senior in high school and being like, okay, my future is so fucking up in the air. And I just was following what I was interested in. I studied psychology. I started doing yoga just because those were two things that I was separately interested in. And then like I graduated college, and my perspectives have evolved so much. And then I've found DU, and DU was just a podcast I was listening to. And then I was doing yoga on the side. And then now it's evolved to where I'm on the podcast and I'm a yoga teacher. And now I teach for the people. It's like everything kind of coalesced and intertwined in a way that was perfectly appropriate. And that's just a reminder that like you don't know, but you can trust yourself to follow those gut feelings, because you're tapped into this and you are the intelligence of the whole, and your will and what you feel drawn to do is the will of the whole. And you don't really need to question that or judge yourself for like the choices that you make. That actually makes things a lot more confusing and messy when you think you should be living a certain way, because all of that is just conceptual. And so kind of how you mentioned, like, I don't know, I just want to like play video games or, whatever it is that you feel drawn to do or that you enjoy, do that. And then you'll see it'll evolve in ways that you could never possibly foresee. But sort of like Ray was saying too, like maybe you feel those things because somewhere in the future, you're already doing something involved with that. And yeah, I love talking about time because it's trippy as fuck. it I'm starting to see more so the past and future as just extensions of the present, and your perspective of the past changes based on your point of view of the present, right? The more deeply you're able to appreciate the present for what it is, the more deeply you're able to appreciate the past and how all of that was necessary to get for you to be where you are. And also when you're very deeply involved with the present moment and more so focused on that, the future, there's a lot more possibility and abundance that, I don't know, like exists, as long as you're not trying to fixate on one specific version of the future and then curate your present moment to fit into that rigid structure. And yeah, so it's interesting how like all of that shifts, but it only shifts right now. Like the only way that you can, I don't know, like alter your future is by altering the way that you interact with the present. And so the best course of action that I found is just to be deeply involved with what's going on right now and to just trust that whatever it is I'm doing and feel called to do, even though I know that I can't know how it's going to turn out, like at least I'm fully enjoying and sinking my teeth into what I have, right? Um so yeah, it's cool to think about that. And it's funny that you brought up time too, because I went to a yoga class yesterday and the teacher was talking about this exact thing. Um, so yeah, it's funny. The little coincidences like that really just remind me on a daily basis that all of this is interconnected. And it's
Right.
all this dance of intelligence playing out.
It is. And we don't know the dance of it. And that's fine because all we have to do is just be the dance. Like it doesn't have to don't have to know like every detail of it or where the dance is going. Like when you're dancing, and like Alan Watts touches on this too, it's like you're not trying to get from point A to point B. Like the dance is the dance in itself. And I am dancing has a very special place in my heart. Like I love dancing. I listen to electronic dance music like almost exclusively. It's such a huge part of my life, and I'm a DJ too, and I think that's really cool that you mentioned. Um, you wanted to pursue psychology, and you also wanted to pursue yoga. So, but you're a yoga teacher now, so you took that yoga teacher training, and that it you probably went through some doubt before joining because like that's a big commitment. And it's like kind of I wanted to say that you're absolutely right. Like being attentive to the present moment is I, not the best, but the only word I can think of right now is best. Like best way to have a fulfilling, enjoyable, just life. But I was also gonna add taking risks as well. Um, and then my mind went to, well, what is a risk? And why does it seem like a risk? Because you're uncomfortable taking it. Because why are you uncomfortable taking it? Because you're holding on to this idea and this story of who you are. Um, and so by taking the risk, you're kind of like proving your brain wrong as to like what you are. And I've always been interested in like putting together musical playlists. Like I made a mixtape when I was like 14 or 13 just on iTunes and like burned it to a CD. But I had always liked creating like musical sonic journeys. And then when I went to college, I I like one of my friends was just DJing a party, and that captivated me. I was like, holy shit, like this guy is controlling the music through this mixer and he's making it blend seamlessly one song to the next. Like I love this. Like, this is kind of what I want to do. And so I got a mixing board and just started playing around. And obviously there's a lot of self-doubt with it too. It's like, well, how do you mix songs? Like, what do you need to do? And there's all these concepts like beat matching, mixing in key, and equalizing that you have to learn, and you go through that process. But then once you like know that you can mix, if you want to start playing in front of other people, that's another risk. And last year I got asked to DJ a music festival, a small music festival in Pennsylvania. And I was so excited. I said yes, because it was like it would be my first gig. But obviously there was like a lot of fear with that too. I was thinking, well, what am I going to play? What kind of vibe is the music festival? And how am I going to mix it? Like, I'm playing for people now. There's the opportunity for me to be judged, I guess, on how I'm mixing. Um, but again, it's continuing on despite the fear. Like, I saw this really good flowchart on the internet that was like, are you scared? The top box was like, are you scared? Yes. Or are you scared? No. Do it. Are you scared? Yes. Do it scared. um so it's just continuing on. And then I DJ the music festival, and then a friend reached out to me because I posted about it, and he asked me to DJ his wedding. So I've like DJ'd a wedding too. I did that in April. So it's really cool, and it all goes back to this what we were talking about earlier, is that everything is connected. Everything is every experience that you go through. I mean, it all eventually, in the perspective of time, coalesces into this one moment where you realize, holy shit, everything I'm doing has led up to this moment, and it feels so full circle of what everything has what everything that I've done, whether I was judging myself or not, everything I went through has gotten me to this point. And it's beautiful. And I'm just going to realize that that's all I have to do. All I have to do is just keep being. And the rest of it will offer its beauty to you. But it's really your beauty that you're offering to yourself all the time. It's just like, how much are you willing to see it, and how many leaps of faith can you take until you realize it's all just one big leap of faith.
Yeah, I like that you brought up taking those leaps too, because that is a very crucial part. And the more that you do that, the more that you realize it isn't so scary. But I think there is like a process that you go through with that, because I think in the system that we have currently, there are laid out sort of societal blueprint right next choices to make. And so you kind of just do that until you get to a point where there's nobody telling you what the right thing to do is. And so you have to start making those choices for yourself. And it's only scary when you're holding on to an idea, yeah, of who you think you are and what makes you feel safe. And I think that all kind of falls through when you realize, even if you're sitting in your comfort zone, like, uncertainty is always there. Anything can happen at any moment, and you can't control the outcome ever. So there's no point in waiting around when there's something that you really want to do and you feel called to do it, because like, no matter how much you think through all the little details, you can't control how something is going to go. And so it's either you live with the discomfort of stepping out of your comfort zone and going after a new pursuit. Like for me, it was yoga. For you, DJing or podcasting. Or you live with the discomfort of sort of being stagnant and living with this regret in a way of like, this is something I really want to do, but I won't let myself. Like that feeling is not going to go away. I realized. And so it's either you can willingly sort of jump out of your comfort zone, or you can kind of waste more time and then eventually have to do it anyway, right? Like, um, and yeah, the more that you just practice doing that on a day-to-day basis, just jumping in and seeing what happens. Number one, you're going to surprise yourself because it's never going to go how you expect. And in my experience, it's always pretty much gone better than how I expect things to go, because my self-judgment and need for control always skews towards the negative. Like I always assume things are going to go worse than they do. Um, and it proves to you that, no matter how something goes, even if it's not perfect, you get to the end of the day, it's like, it's not going to kill you. Um, and you always step away with new knowledge, new context that will inform, your next leap of faith. And um, the more that you sort of push out of the comfort zone, or like the idea that you believe yourself to be, the more and more you realize that it's never been true. And you can sort of stop building up that idea as well, stop validating it. And then eventually things become less scary. And there are countless examples. I'm sure, listener, that you have examples in your own life of something that you were afraid to do at one point and now you do without thinking about it. Like that's how podcasting is for me now. I was terrified the first time I recorded an episode, and now I can sort of, you know, quell those anxious thoughts because I'm like, yeah, you've done it a million times before. Just show up. That really is the takeaway of just like show up and let your intelligence play out. You don't need to figure out how things are going to go beforehand. And it's okay to trust yourself because you never know how things are playing out. And I don't know, just that's how you live life to the fullest, is just kind of balls to the wall, because, playing small and trying to keep yourself safe really does nothing for you in the end. It's like creating a safe prison that you can rot away in, or you can let all that shit go and just exist within like this exhilarating and vibrant intelligence that you are.
Absolutely. Beautifully said. And coming up on time here, so we'll maybe get some closing thoughts. I love what you said about this is what, like, stepping into uncertainty, like this is what you've been doing. This is what you've been doing your whole life. Think about like when you were like a toddler. I mean, you probably don't remember this, but at one point you had to learn how to walk. And at you only ever knew how to crawl at that point. So walking was like the biggest thing for you at that moment in your life. And I mean, I don't know if you were like, again, like I said, you can't remember, but I could imagine myself being pretty scared to walk on, to only have 2 points of contact on the ground as opposed to 4 when I'm crawling. Like that's half of the points of stability. So probably pretty scared to learn how to walk, but here I am. I'm pretty good at walking, I think. I do it like every day. And the same thing with like biking, swimming, driving a stick shift. Like those are things that are so daunting. I mean, I can remember like learning how to dive and diving into a pool. Like before, everyone's first dive, like there's always a little bit of fear, some more than others, but I was certainly afraid. Like, what the hell? I'm going to go head first into water and like not know what's going to happen. But then you do it. You, I don't know, something clicks in your head and you're just, okay, it's a risk to take to like do the thing that you're scared of, but it's also, and if not a bigger risk, to just stay the same and like live in, like you were saying, the discomfort of the what if, being stuck in the what if. Like, wouldn't you rather do the thing, fail spectacularly at it, and then learn from that experience, which you would learn so much more from by doing, as opposed to learning from living in your own story. And so, yeah, I mean, like this, I wanted to like title the episode like letting go of enlightenment, but I feel like we've talked more about letting go in general. We talked about a lot of things. I don't remember what we talked about, to be honest, but we're here. We made it. And I'm feeling good. I I feel energized from this conversation. I always feel energized when I talk to people who like get it, I guess. Get it in the sense that like all thoughts are fucked and like this story of you has no basis in reality. I feel like if you're talking to someone who like sees it like that, then the zest of life is just abundant in and that energy is it's there and you can feel it. So yeah, I'd love to hear your closing thoughts, Jack.
Yeah, I agree. It's just uplifting because it's just a reminder, oh yeah, all that bullshit weight that was milling in the background either before this conversation or, throughout our days recently, like it's all fucked. I can put it down. And then it's like, now what can I do with all this extra energy that I've been sort of wasting in a way? Uh yeah, but I don't really remember what we talked about either, but I can tell you I enjoyed it. And I guess closing thoughts are just don't take yourself too seriously. Don't try and figure out how things are playing out and do something that scares you because that's where the learning is. That's where the expansion is. And just know that at the end of the day, you're going to be fine. As long as you're continuing to exist, there's no threat. And when you don't see yourself as just this individual thing, then like the possibilities are literally endless. So yeah, go check out my podcast, Dualistic Unity, if you're interested in this conversation, because we have it all the time. We have a dope Patreon community as well. We do group chats 5 days a week, and I teach yoga classes for Patreon supporters a couple times a month. So um, check that out. But yeah, you can follow me on social media at Jack Eternity. And thank you, Ben, for hosting me on this podcast. It's been a dope chat, and we got to connect more often for sure.
Yeah, I was gonna ask if you wanted to plug anything, but you already did that, so thank you. And you're welcome for hosting, and thank you for being my first guest. I think this was like, I don't know. It feels very appropriate that you're my first guest because, like we were saying, like we're on the same. Uh, we were on that same like letting go of this conceptual stuff. So
Mhm.
It was awesome. It was great chatting with you. And yeah, listener, I'll catch you on the next episode. Stop.